Well, hello there. It is almost 6 o'clock, so I'm going to wait just a little bit and just wait for the feed to kick in. All right. Well, if you're joining me now, thank you very much. If you are here, it means that you either love tea or you're curious about tea, or you are tuning in because you're one of my friends who wanted to check out what I was doing for my live video. What I'm doing for the next few weeks is going through a series of tea classes. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating a whole series just talking about tea. And it's going to talk about tea processing and what the health benefits of tea are, what tea blending is, what different herbs and spices can do for you, and going to get into the nitty-gritty at some point, but I'm going to start really basic today, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what tea is, where it comes from, and get an idea of what you want to learn about. So if you have any questions, if anything pops up into your brain that you want to ask me, if I don't answer it today, then I will answer it in a new series or another video that's coming up in the near future. So every Tuesday, 6 p.m., I'm going to be doing these videos just to talk to you about tea. And if you're not into tea already, I want you to learn about it because it's something that's so healthy, and not only is it good for your body, but it can be really good for your soul. It's very soothing. It's one of the things that attracted me to tea in the first place. So my name's Dina Cataldo, and I have been a lawyer for about 10 years now. A few years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and that's kind of what kicked me off into this whole tea adventure. Basically, I was a tea lover, but I didn't realize that I was not drinking it as healthy as I could be. I was putting tons of sugar in it. I was steeping tea dust, I'll talk to you in a little bit about that, for minutes, and it was astringent and it was bitter, but I didn't really know that that isn't necessarily how my tea was supposed to taste, and I didn't realize that there was a lot of health benefits that I was losing because of the way I was drinking it. So after I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I started researching herbs and spices and different foods that were good for me, not really knowing what it was that I was looking for. I was just trying to learn. But what I was learning meant that everything I was eating needed to include more herbs and spices. And I didn't grow up eating with a lot of herbs and spices. I mean, probably the most basic stuff I had was salt and pepper, maybe some garlic. I'm Sicilian, in case you didn't know. It's called Sicilian Tea Company. So I'm still learning about herbs and spices, but as I was learning, I was trying to find easy ways to incorporate those things into my diet. One of the ways that I was doing it is trying to start blending these herbs and spices into teas. It was a really easy thing to do, a lot of trial and error, and it was fun to play with. I already liked tea, so I was just having fun with it. And as I was having fun with it, I started to learn more about different kinds of teas rather than just, black tea dust that I was getting in tea bags. And I'm going to show you a little bit of the comparison between the tea dust, or AKA Fannings, and the whole and partial leaf teas that I brew now. So I love tea. I started brewing it better. I started teaching about tea blending because it was just something that was just so much fun, and I came up with an easy ratio in order to make a good cup of tea with herbs, spices, and teas, and I'll share more about that with you in a little bit. But I just started teaching it, and I started blending teas for my friends, and I started giving them away. And then, the more I talked to people, the more I thought, well, God, it would be really fun if I just started a business around it. And by doing so, it also serves me because I have lots of tea available to me and all kinds of different teas available to me. So it's a lot of fun for me. So I'm going to get into a little bit of an overview about what we're going to talk about today. So we'll talk about what is tea. We'll talk about where it comes from. We're going to talk about the basic kinds of teas, and there's 6 basic kinds, and we're going to focus on 5 of them today. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between loose leaf tea and the tea dust that you probably see a lot of in the tea bags, and maybe that's what you're used to most. So let's start a little bit about what is tea. So everything comes from the same kind of tea plant, and just to use the traditional nomenclature, it's Camellia sinensis. Now, here in Sacramento, we've got a lot of camellia trees. You can actually see some out my window right now. And that is a camellia. However, it's not the kind of plant where you would get tea leaves from. So there's Camellia sinensis and Camellia sinensis arabica, or assamica, excuse me, that are the two main tea trees that most of the leaves you drink come from. And they were originally grown in the regions between China and India, and they've, been, put together, they've been experimented with, they have been grafted onto different plants over and over time and again to create different benefits. So just like you might hear about, different plants that we eat, we are also learning about how we can create a better tea tree. So a tea tree that might be better at growing in a sunny climate, or growing in a tropical climate, or maybe it fights pests better. So those are the kinds of things that growers are doing in order to evolve the tea tree. And so you'll get different kinds of tea trees. So it's a lot like wine, right? Like you have different grapes for different kinds of teas, but they are all basically coming from grapes, right? And then those grapes are created to grow in certain areas. So you'll have some growing in Napa, you'll have some growing in France, and they all have different characteristics that bring out different aromas, different flavors from those particular grapes. Same thing goes for teas. So everything that you hear the word tea, it all comes from a tea tree. It has caffeine, it has antioxidants, it has lots of other nutrients inside too, but they all come from a basically similar leaf. Now, when you hear herbal tea, the words herbal tea, that's not really a tea. So for instance, chamomile or rooibos, you'll hear different kinds of, herbal teas. Well, they're not actually tea because they don't come from a tea tree. They come from chamomile flowers, or they come from a bush. Those are actually what's also called tisanes. And a tisane is just that. It's an herbal infusion, that kind of thing. Now, you can also have blends. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But things like this, you've got, see if I can get that into the camera. So you've got rooibos, you've got lavender, you have some cinnamon in there. That would be a tisane or an herbal blend, okay? And then you've got teas, like this one's a black tea, and I also have licorice root in there, and I have peppermint in there. And that's a tea blend, okay? That's not just tea, it's a tea blend. So we've already talked a little bit about where the trees come from and where they are grown, and about experimenting and basically playing with how these trees are grown so that you can create these different flavors. It's a lot like what you might traditionally find in a wine room and what you might be learning there in terms of how the leaves are grown and how the grapes are grown. So let's talk about the basic types of teas. Okay, so this is a white tea. Let's see if we can get some light on it actually. I don't know if I can get light on it. So white teas are much lighter than you might expect from usual like black teas, right? So they're multicolored. Some of them are lighter brown. Some of the leaves are lighter green. And they are the least processed of teas. So we'll talk a little bit more about the processing for individual teas in the future. I'm not going to talk about all of that tonight because it is a really big topic and I could talk all night about it. So we're just going to talk a little bit about just what the basics are. And the next tea I want to talk to you about is green tea. Now, you've probably heard a lot about green tea, right? How it has a lot of antioxidants, how it's something that you want to have in your diet. And again, you'll see the leaves are much lighter green than they are with the white teas or with the black teas. And they are less processed, or they're processed in a way to stop the oxidation. Now, oxidation is when the air meets the oils in the tree leaf and the oils evaporate. Okay, so when a tea leaf is broken, okay, when you break a tea leaf, you release oils, and those oils get released into the air and they start oxidizing, the air starts oxidizing the leaf. All right, so I'm not going to talk much about yet. Oh, you see Rocco in the background there? Yeah, he's excited to be here. All right, so I'm not going to talk much about yellow teas because really that's something that's drunk more domestically in China, and you're really not going to see much yellow teas. It's kind of a nice sweet tea, but maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that in another program. The next tea I want to talk to you about is oolong, and oolongs are probably one that you've heard a lot about. Sometimes you'll hear them as diet teas. I don't know that I would characterize them as a diet tea. I look at all teas as healthy teas, especially if you're replacing something that's unhealthy. So you're not going to see me saying, oh, it's a diet tea, it's a detox tea. I don't use those words because as I did the research, yes, they're healthy. Teas are healthy. They provide antioxidants, but they are not like a cure-all. Okay, they're something that is a great addition to your diet, and it's especially great when you replace something that's unhealthy in your diet with tea. All right, so oolongs, there's a lot of different kinds. This is a milk oolong, and it's rolled, as you can see, just into these little balls, and they can be rolled by hand or they could be rolled by machines because they have machines now that do that. All right, and then we can also talk about black tea, which is what you're probably most familiar with. And black tea is also called red tea in China. So because of the red liqueur that it creates. So if you are in China and someone says red tea, that's what they mean. And then you've got these gorgeous long leaves that have been twisted into this black tea. Love that. And then the sixth tea that I want to talk about are dark teas. And the dark tea that you have probably heard of is pu'er. And pu'er looks like a black tea. You can see how it's kind of twisted leaves, but it's a semi-fermented tea. So we'll talk more about that in future episodes, but I just want to talk to you right now about what the basics are. So those are the 6 teas. We've got a white tea, we have green teas, we have oolongs, skipped over the yellow teas. We also have black teas and we have dark teas. Those are the 6 basic kinds of teas. All right, so you can theoretically make tea out of any of these teas out of the same kind of leaf, right? But it's important to know that the process that they go is what determines what kind of leaf they become. Like, is it a white tea? Is it a green tea? Is it a black tea? So the processing that they go through is really going to determine what happens. What are we going to get when we buy it at the grocery store? And the other thing that really matters when it comes to making the kind of tea that you're drinking is, where is it grown? Hey, is it grown in Malawi? Is it grown in Sri Lanka? Is it grown in China? Is it grown on a hilltop? Or is it a rocky terrain? Is it in China, Japan? So many different places. They're even growing it in the United States now. So there's a lot of different things to think about when creating a leaf that then becomes, let's say, a milk oolong, right? All right. So let's talk a little bit about loose leaf versus tea dust. I was going to say bagged tea versus loose leaf tea, but really what it comes down to, what the big difference is what is the difference between Fannings and loose leaf tea, and why should you care? So I opened up one of my old tea bags and I saved this just for this kind of a video I wanted to do. So if you can take a look, do you see these like grains? They look like grains of sand. That is what Fannings look like. That's tea dust. So when you get a lot of tea bags, you'll get that really fine, grainy sand, also known as Fannings, in your tea bag. And the reason why they're so small is so that you can brew them faster. It brews really quickly. It's not going to taste as good, and you're not going to get as many health benefits. The more processed the leaf, the less antioxidants you're going to get. Maybe not by a huge amount, but it's something I won't drink anymore. Let me put it that way. I don't drink Fannings anymore because I feel like, what's the point? If I am going to get the health benefits, I feel that I'm going to get better health benefits from brewing a tea longer and getting the whole leaf. And if I'm going to drink tea, I'm going to like the tea. I'm not going to drink something that's bitter, because you may get to a point where, well, tell me if you've ever done this, okay? If you have ever dunked a tea bag into your teacup and just left it there and not bothered to take it out, you probably experienced a puckering sensation when you sipped it, but you may have thought that that's what it was supposed to taste like. At least that's what I have done in the past, and I discovered that that just wasn't the way to go after I learned about loose leaf tea, because I just kept drinking it thinking, well, I guess I need to add more sugar. I guess I need to add more mint leaves. I guess I'm not drinking it right. So I just kept drinking it, not knowing that there was anything different out there. And then when I discovered there was something different out there that was the whole leaf and the partial leaf teas, then I started drinking those. And when we go into other sessions, I'm going to talk to you about how to brew loose leaf teas and give you some tips on how to brew them. But really, it's the leaves are just more flavorful when they're whole or partial leaf. You're going to get more complex flavors. There's really, to me, there's no point in drinking Fannings anymore in tea bags. It's not fun for me. It doesn't taste good, so I don't see the point. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. If you think something different, I'd love to hear from you. So next Tuesday, I am going to talk to you about how tea is made into what we drink. So think of it as, again, like how grapes are made into wine. Like what kind of processes makes a grape into a Pinot grape rather than a Zin grape or a Syrah grape, right? This is how we create these white teas, these green teas, and all the different variations of green teas and all the variations of oolongs and those kinds of things. So you'll learn about that in the next session. So it is getting super hot, and I am going to copy a link in the comments for a cold brew iced tea recipe. It's cold brewing tea article. It just makes easier and tastier iced tea. Check it out. It also has a link in there to a Tea Blending 101 guide that I give my students when we do classes. So that's free. Go ahead and link on there. It'll give you some ideas as to recipes. It'll give you also a little bit of the background of what we talked about today, and get into some of the future sessions we're going to talk about, which is like brewing and those kinds of things. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you again next time, and please comment below with any questions that you have so that I can address them in the future episodes, okay? Thank you very much. You have a great night.